Gobble, gobble, gobble. Welcome to Buckets. My name's Matt Moore, and I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. Glad to have you with us on a Monday this Thanksgiving week. Hope you guys are having yourselves a NBA betting season to be thankful for. This is Buckets, the NBA betting podcast and the Action Network, brought to you by FanDuel. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer. I'm joined today by two very special guests, Joe Delara, NBA props. What's a reference? I need like a whiz. It's supposed to be whiz kid because it kind of rhymes, but you're a man. Whiz man. Whiz man sounds wrong. Anyway, Joe's here.
I feel like you can't do that one.
Joe's here. So is Jim Turvey. He's going to be joining us as well as we're going to look at a couple of futures. Talk about the latest stuff. This is your Monday recap episode. A little bit different format for this week. I didn't want to do futures because Brandon and I just did all the win totals, and I want to give MVP like another week before we kind of do like a 20% of the way check-in next week. So I'm putting futures aside for today. We're going to talk about the injuries and how they've impacted things. We're talking about the most important covers over the weekend, and we're going to get into a little bit of the best bet for MVP right at the end, but no awards talk for this week. Well, I'll let you know that everything we talk about on today's show can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. Best way for you to track your picks, get up to the second information where the bets and money you're coming in on. You can find all sorts of great analysis, like Stuckey that's going to claim that the Chargers was a great bet when it was a horrible bet. The Chiefs should have covered that game by 2 touchdowns. No, I'm not mad. I didn't have money on it. I'm really annoyed at the conversation around Kansas City Chiefs. But that's a football conversation. We're going to talk basketball today, and we're going to start with the Philadelphia 76ers right after Brandon and I get done talking about like, hey, I still feel pretty good about the Sixers. Yeah, you know what? They're starting to round it. Yeah, Tyrese Maxey got hurt. That immediately Tyrese Maxey gets hurt. And a monster went over the Bucks. So there's a lot of ways we can kind of go with this Maxey injury. Let's put the timeline in perspective. Out 2 to 4 weeks with the injury. It's going to be a little bit of time for him. 48 weeks for him. Harden's supposed to be back in 2. So December 3rd is like the circled kind of like, that's when you can start looking to see if Harden is back or not. He told reporters the other day he's on track and feels great. That means absolutely nothing. That doesn't mean anything, because when a player feels like he's recovered from the injury and when he feels like he's in game condition to start playing again are two different things. So don't expect that. Joe, I'll start with you. I immediately, when Maxey got hurt that night, I bet Harden 3 units MVP. I went in on Embiid MVP. I immediately went in on Embiid. Yeah. The thinking for me is this. I think he smashes over this stretch. I think he puts up huge points on huge usage. Particularly, he's playing a bunch of teams with a weak interior. He loves to beat up on bad teams. There are some tougher teams towards the end of the stretch when Maxey will be out, but Harden will be back for some of that. So that'll help a little bit. And my thought process is that the wins and losses don't honestly matter here, because I think at full strength, they still get to 47, 48, 49, maybe 50 plus wins. And if they do, he buffets the numbers now, even if the win-loss is not great. And then later he can buffet the win-loss record when his numbers get a little bit lower. So as somebody that builds a position throughout the entire season, I've been betting Steph consistently week by week. I went ahead and put 3 units on Embiid. That was my first reaction from just a awards perspective. And even though we're not going to talk individually about the awards, what was kind of your reaction when Tyrese Maxey got hurt?
Yeah, it took me a minute. I wanted to see what I felt a little bit nervous. I mean, granted, the Celtics have been incredible anyway, but about, the prospects of the Sixers winning the division. But I still think that they're going to be good. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Embiid, I think he's actually gotten better. And it's something that we've discussed on the podcast. And I know you've discussed at length about and criticized really is his ability to especially pass out of a double team. And I think he's gotten better at that. And over the last 2 seasons, actually, without Maxey and Harden, we actually see Embiid's assists jump. He's averaging 6.4 in 8 games without those guys. So he's able to really be like a center point and like a hub for this offense that I don't think he could have done in years previously, but he's kind of getting there. That's a new skill that he's really developed. I think that the Sixers are going to be fine. Their upcoming schedule, like you said, is like very soft. I mean, they have a big matchup with the Nets on Tuesday night, which I think I'm going to be betting on the 76ers, but they have a big matchup there. And then they have games against the Hornets, back-to-back against the Magic, the Hawks. Like this is soft. And if Embiid can really put up some monster numbers here, this is his time to shine and maybe get an MVP award that's not just given by the Council of Philadelphia.
Jim, so when you look at kind of like how this is shaping up, I guess the big question is, do you think the Sixers are going to be okay on a long-term basis and this is a short-term issue? Are you worried that this is going to be something that really, like, I think there was a lot of like, oh God, the Sixers are doomed talk, which I was like, guys, he's not out for the season. If he's out for the season, I'd be with you. We got 5 months to the playoffs. Like, I am simultaneously in these games matter. We're almost 20% of the way through the season. You can't just ignore these games, but also there's 5 months of basketball in front of us. There's a long way to go. What's kind of your reaction and how to bet Philadelphia right now, given the Maxey injury?
Yeah, I think I'm with Joe 100%. This next week, it looks pretty winnable. That Brooklyn matchup, Claxton's going to be out for potentially as well. So he against that front line already, he's got a massive advantage. And then if Claxton can't make it, that's they're looking in great shape. My worry here would be the long-term effect on Embiid of having to carry a team entirely for 2 weeks. I am a Embiid. I love Embiid, but I do get a little bit worried with everything coming down on him. Now, start of the season, he didn't look like he was up for it. A couple weeks in, he suddenly looked like that injury that was bugging him to start the season kind of faded away. He did look like he was capable of carrying a team. We know he can do it for stretches. The key is going to be with him. It's always health, right? And if these 2 weeks where he is putting up insane numbers and making, if you get in on Embiid today, like I think maybe both of you did, that number is going to be a lot shorter by the end of the week. I almost guarantee it. But when we come down to to the end of the season, is he going to have, kind of burned out a couple weeks later in the season where, because he was going for 40, 15 and 5 for this 2 week stretch to carry them without Harden and Maxey, is that going to kind of come back to haunt him down the stretch?
It's a good question. I think the only thing is that I never really worry about Embiid in terms of too much being put on him because nobody is protected more than he is. Like, that's just a fact. It's just they have from the very beginning, they've been very proactive with his injury history and understanding that he needs nights off. Like, he just takes nights off. And so if he gets in a spot where he's just feeling run down, like, they'll just rest him. I'm never worried about them putting too much on him. I don't worry about that. The Sixers will always kind of be like, we can make the playoffs even if he misses this game or 2 games or whatever. I don't feel like there will be Harden and Maxey's out, so we need you to go. There won't be a pressure thing. They'll be like, hey, how are you feeling? And he'll be like, I'm sleepy. And okay, we'll take a nap, big fella. Like, that's just how they are with him. So there are some players that play all 72, 82 games, and then there's players that don't. And Joel's one of the ones that doesn't. So I'm not as worried about that. One team I am worried about is the Memphis Grizzlies, who they're dealing with a lot of issues right now. So Ja goes down with an ankle. It's just an ankle sprain. It should be okay. Bane's out several weeks. And for me, Jim, that's honestly a bigger problem, is Bane being out, because Bane's been
I agree entirely
crucial for them that I feel like this is a bigger issue. I have some more kind of concerns about Memphis. I mean, Jaren just got back from injury and he looks good-ish. But they don't have a lot of depth. A little bit of this I worry about being confirmation bias. And like, look, my numbers are always going to suggest fading Memphis. I was very nearly on Brooklyn on Sunday night when the Grizzlies got housed by the Nets, and I didn't know how to anticipate the return of Kyrie Irving, and so I didn't know how to factor that in. But Memphis is going to be a team that, whether Ja's there or not, I'm going to be looking to, I think, fade, just because they're really banged up already.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, Ja is a better player, but Bane is in a way more essential to the Grizzlies' success. You look at who's backing up. You got Jones to back up. Morant, that's a really solid backup point guard. Right now, John Conchar is starting, and if you're relying on 15 to 20 from him, you're not in great shape. Now, before the season, I was, I planted my flag on Memphis Grizzlies Island, and I was the high man here at Action, and part of it was I do think they deal with these injuries better than most teams. So I'm not quite as nervous. The Bane injury does have me nervous. One guy who I think is going to be kind of key this next stretch, and I'd love to see a little bit more of him. And I know it's not a position for position fit with Bane or Morant, but Brandon Clark is a guy who I thought when Triple J was out to start season, I thought he was going to like kind of step in. I know they went with Aldama in the end, but I was looking for a little bit more from Clark, and his numbers are actually down this year. I know you're worried about their depth in general, and so far it hasn't played out exactly as I've seen. I mean, they're getting wins. They're doing kind of some Grizzly stuff, but it does look like they're kind of teetering in a way that even has me, probably the high person on Memphis, a little bit nervous. If not for the long term, then certainly for this upcoming stretch here.
Joe, so last year a lot was made of the fact that the Grizzlies kept winning and covering and being great without.
Kind of funny, yeah.
Without, that was like a big deal last year, and I push back on it because I've seen the shit before where I tend to think of every season for a team as its own microorganism, like it's its own kind of environment, it's an own ecosystem, and you can have the same personnel, but it will just react differently. Guys change, guys evolve, roles change, players develop. Like technically speaking, the Grizzlies of last year were a lot roster wise like the year before, but they were way different because Desmond Bane learned how to dribble, and that changed things dramatically for them. And also Dylan Brooks missed a lot of games, but we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, you
know. But so I don't have a lot of faith here in, I'll say this, if Bane comes back and Ja is out, I feel like everyone's going to be like, you know who's really great without Ja is the Grizzlies. And everyone's going to go that route. I think I'm probably going to be going the other way from the perspective of I don't necessarily know that stat was indicative of who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of tough because you're missing two guys now. Like, and it's kind of one of those things, like you could survive maybe one or the other, but it's like when you start losing both, then it's like, it's kind of like how many points somebody's worth to the spread. And then it's like, oh, like this person's worth 3, but then it's worth 2. So it's like, is this a 5-point move? It's like, no. It's now like an 8-point move because you're missing both. And like, I think what's interesting about this is you're missing, in my opinion, at least like the two best players in the Grizzlies. I mean, we can argue where Jaren Jackson Jr. falls in that.
No,
it's
those two. Yeah.
I think it's those two. So you're losing the two best players on the team. And two of really like your best offensive options on the team as well, because Dillon Brooks it doesn't matter how many times he shoots, he's going to score 20 points. And, you know, like I think that what's going to be interesting is as long as they can stay in the playoff picture, which I don't think we can just take for granted, but as long as they can, this might be a really crucial opportunity for them to develop their young guys. You know, like whether it's David Roddy or Laravia, like, and see if one of them can fit and just say like, all right, well, if they do perform, now this team has depth where we didn't think they had depth. So as long as they can stay around, but I think what you were alluding to is right. Like somebody's got to come back because this team as currently constructed, I think is like bad. And I'm definitely not looking to back them, especially with, you know, like your leading scorer being Dillon Brooks with these two guys out. The one thing that I did like, and I think Brandon wrote about it, and I'm not sure, I think the odds have kind of like tanked right now, but Jaren Jackson Jr. to win Defensive Player of the Year, I think could be interesting. Granted, if he's gonna start missing a lot of games, then I think maybe there's a little bit of a buy opportunity still, and it didn't get nuked too much at this point in time.
Well, like Joe said, I agree on the Triple J point, and I think he had 5 blocks in his first game, and not even in like in full minute share. But to your point on Bane and Ja, it's they lose their shot creators, right? Like Brooks, we know he can create a shot; he creates 30 of them a game, but he's not creating shots for the offense. And I think you're right that that was a great example on the point spread. It feels exponential to have those two shot creators and offense drivers out for them.
It's a cluster injury, right? Like that's the best comparison for it. It's a cluster injury in terms of playmaking. So if like we look at it from a football perspective, how cluster injuries in the wide receiving core or whatever can impact the spread. I think it's a similar kind of thing here. We just evaluate them based off of their overall value and production in basketball. And I think we should take a look at what clusters to certain areas of necessary skills, whether it's
Yeah.
rebounding or shot, playmaking or whatever, how those can impact the spread as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think especially with the Grizzlies, just real quick here, it's like when you lose your two guards, I think that this should, I'm not sure what it's going to wind up shaking out to be, but I'd imagine that their depth is going to be damaged like significantly at the guard position. I think fading them in the second quarter against stronger bench units might be an angle, just because you're getting like real deep onto that Grizzlies bench in the second quarter, probably. So that might be an angle, at least right now and right away before it adjusts.
That was
Dame
a really
re-aggravated his calf for the Blazers. So Portland's once again going to be without Dame for a little bit. Now, they just said they re-aggravated it. It's mostly about caution. Think it should be fine. They've looked pretty good without him in the stretches that he was missing. They actually weren't that bad. They were actually pretty good. Simons, as long as it's kind of a similar thing with Memphis, where as long as Dame's out but Simons is in, you're fine. But when Dame and Simons were both out, that's when you're like, well, they really can't kind of do this. Jeremy Grant's been really great. I don't know how his props have been doing. I would think Jeremy Grant's props have got to be hitting at a pretty high rate. So I don't necessarily, a lot of this with Portland is I don't know really how to evaluate them. I don't know how real they are yet. I'm still very much in let's see where they're at Christmas. Not from I'm skeptical. I think that they're fine. I bet the over. I thought the line was weak. I thought the idea of them being bad was preposterous. I don't know where people got that idea. But I thought they were fine. But I'm not sure that they're like they're definitely not top of the West good. The question is going to be, are they the type of team that starts at the top of the West and they slide to 4, or the type of team that starts at the top of the West and then slides to 6 or 7 and they're in the play-in? Right now, I'm still kind of like, I think they're a play-in team, but some of the teams in the West are struggling, so that opens a door for them. Jim, what do you think about Portland and where they're at, especially if they got to deal without Dame for a little while?
Yeah, I'm pretty high on Portland right now. I think you mentioned it, but it's almost the exact inverse of the situation in Memphis, where, one of the downsides to having Dame and Simons as your backcourt is, come postseason, you've got 2 small electric guards, but the upside to it is one goes down and it's not the end of the world. You can kind of fill in for a little bit easier than some teams that are, that lack that, multi overlap in skills. Yeah, like you said, Grant's been playing great. Josh Hart has been playing great. I've always been high on Josh Hart. They have like this long, strong defense wings. They got Grant, they got Hart. Winslow's been solid again. And if Peyton ever comes back, I'm high on them long term too. Even I think they're a team that could give some teams some trouble in the postseason. They're really switchable. Phillips seems to be coaching a lot better than last season. So I really like this Portland team, and I love their ability to kind of float through this time when Dane's injured. I think they're 3-2 when he's out, and 2 of those were decent wins. I think they beat Phoenix and I think I'm looking at here the Pelicans as well, our beloved Pelicans. So their floor is a little bit higher than I think I even realized coming into the season. And then the question becomes, come postseason, how high is that ceiling with Lillard and Simons in the backcourt? But they do have that wing length that I really love. I think they're a pretty fun team to watch right now.
Yeah,
Joe,
I think
I got a question for you, Joe. With Portland in particular, I think one of the questions is they're getting this down on the defensive end, which was really surprising me when I started looking through the numbers. That to me is one where I start to that does raise like a little bit of a red flag at me. When you have a team that has never been good defensively, with personnel that was the same, that should not be good defensively, there's no way that you can tell me that Dame, Nurkic, and Simons together should be a good defensive combo, no matter who you put in the other 2 slots. And people will say, well, Nurk's a good defender. And I'm like, yes, Nurk's a good defender when he can play drop, but he can't play drop with Dame and Simons because they're too small. And those 2 can be fine if you switch them, but you can't switch because Nurkic can't switch. Like, that's been my entire take on them historically. But my question for you is does Portland have enough staying power to where, given variance in everything, just the universe here, it are long shot future division bets anything that you would even like remote, like a division bet, I think is at least interesting to ponder, given that Minnesota is still trying to figure itself out. Denver's looked awesome at times.
Yeah.
But they're going through H&S stuff right now. Not really them. In general, I do kind of wonder if Portland is accurately priced in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could maybe get you could get a good number on Portland in that regard. I mean, they've been playing really well, and they're 2 games behind the Jazz in the win column, but I don't think any of us expect that to really hold up there. I think that the division is interesting. It's kind of one of those things like nobody's really playing for the division, so I think it actually makes these division bets like more interesting because it just like it just happens. And the concern that I have with Portland, and you alluded to this with the defense, is we saw this, I think it was 2 years ago with the New York Knicks, and the Knicks had like it made no sense. Like their expected allowed effective field goal percentage was dramatically worse than what they were actually allowing. The Blazers have the worst expected allowed effective field goal percentage in the league at 55.5%. And like that's not good. And the area, but what's interesting to me is that they're already performing poorly from 3-point range. So like in terms of where they're defending the shot. So like they're giving up the threes already. It's not like there should be that much negative regression against them from 3-point range. So like I don't know if we can expect it to really like hold up, but like I think in the regular season it's fine because we've seen this where teams don't really exploit pressure points during the regular season, and it becomes a problem in the playoffs instead. So I think that what you're saying is really like it's like we look at this and it's like I don't know, but like then it's it's like then it's fine because it's the regular season, nobody cares. So I do think that there is an opportunity right now to maybe bet on them with the fact that like, yeah, maybe Dame misses some time, but when you got Simons averaging basically 30 points a game across like the last 30 games without Dame, like it's okay. Like they're going to be good. So I think it's an opportunity maybe.
I'll say this isn't as much of a long shot as I thought it was. It wasn't as much of a buy low as I thought it was. At FanDuel, Nuggets are minus 185. Blazers are only plus 480. You compare that to Pelicans plus 210. Good God, what is this market? Jazz are plus 550, and then the Wolves at plus 600.
That's crazy.
So,
that's crazy.
We're actually not buying low on Portland. Maybe let's give it a little bit of time. Real quickly, Pascal Siakam should be back soon. He's entering like the time frame for the return from the groin injury. He was one of the 10 best players I've seen this season. Like just point blank overall production impact. I've had a hard time figuring out Toronto over the last couple of years, and I started to bet well on and against them. I found good spots to back them. You want them as a dog. You want them in spots where, particularly, I think you want them in as a home dog or small favorite versus good teams is where they are really good. Like, I think they're actually a little bit better when they are a small favorite versus a good team and the money's coming down the other side. Like, that to me is like an advantageous Raptor spot. Siakam back soon, though, Jim. That's going to return them. I've been staying away from them just because I'm like, I'm not betting on Banton and Chris Boucher and this whole
Chris Boucher. I ride with Chris Boucher.
He's okay. That's a choice. That's a choice. He's been good. He's been good. But especially for a team that wants to play at starters 45 minutes a night, when those starters are not available, I've not wanted to bet them. But look, when they get back to full health, the Raptors are a team I don't want futures on, but they're a team I want to look for night-to-night spots for. I'm looking at their line every night.
Yeah, their injury report has been insane. Even right now, there's 8 players on it. I haven't bet on them in, I don't think, multiple weeks. When there's that many players, it feels like every night they have 5 guys questionable. But I agree with you. I actually, when they are healthy and when they're a little bit easier to figure out, I know you're a big like looking for specific matchups and kind of factors for certain teams. The stuff that I kind of weigh when I'm looking at teams as well, they kind of pop as really good in certain things and really bad in certain things. So I find them fun to bet that, they get points off turnovers. They don't turn it over. So you can kind of look for teams that are on the opposite ends of those spectrums. They hit the offensive glass really hard. Same deal there. Yeah, they're one of the teams that I, when healthy, enjoy betting most. I think I'm a little bit higher. I promised our teams I'm lower. I'm not the person who's higher on every team. But I do like Toronto. It's another team like Memphis, the kind of Memphis East for me, where I think it's a great coach. I think that they use their depth really well. And like Joe was saying when we were talking about Memphis, they slot in those younger guys and they kind of get those minutes during the regular season, and they then like it pays off in gold down the line. So I'm definitely looking to bet them as they return to health. And I agree with you 100% on Siakam. He's one of those who it feels like has really, he took a little bit of a leap that maybe we thought was a bubble leap, but it looks like maybe it was, prospect growth is not linear, kind of up down and moving back up.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Siakam, the big key is that with him, it's not that he added a component. Like that's what we want to look at. It's like, oh, he's shooting threes now, or oh, he's got a post game. And with Siakam, he's just more polished. He's just like a more polished player this season. He's more refined. He's more locked in. He's so good at everything. Look, I totally agree with you that the Raptors are Memphis East. They're not going to win their division, and they're going to get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs.
How dare you?
So, Joe, Joe, my only question on Toronto here is Scotty Barnes ever going to be healthy enough for us to bet on his props again, or are those
apparently
just
not?
Apparently not.
I don't know what to do with him anymore, because every time I think that he's going to be like point Scotty, he has 1 assist and like Banton plays 50 minutes. So like I've just given up on the Raptors at this point. I don't know what to do with them. Like,
so we talked a lot about all these injuries, and it's a reality, obviously, in the game every year, and it's been a bit problem increasing over the last couple of years. It's one of the reasons why you want to follow Fantasy Labs NBA on Twitter for as long as Twitter exists. You want to do that because we post updates from there constantly for just whatever is going on, game time decisions, starting lineups. You can get that announcement as soon as it's announced. It goes into the system, it gets spit out on Twitter, turn on the notifications. You can go, oh, okay, they are starting who I thought they were starting. Now I can put this bet in. And most times, there are exceptions. You'll see the line move if there's a sudden injury, and you want to try and get ahead of that, obviously. But that's one of the values. But the other key for this is Bane, I think, represents a really good example of this. We've talked often on the show about X star is worth Y to the spread. Like we broke down Luka last week about how much he was going to be worth to the spread, and it wound up like we were pretty accurate on it being 4.5, like a 1.5 more than Paul George, essentially a half point to a point, depending on where LeBron's at in his career of LeBron, right? Somewhere in between there. Like between Paul George and LeBron sounds like a good spot for Luka Doncic. Mm-hmm. But most of the analysis is based on that. But if you're going to put Paul George at 3 points and I don't know, like John Morant at 2.5 or 3 or any of these numbers, by their very nature, role players are never going to get accounted for enough. So when you have these type of opportunities, when Desmond Bane is out, that's when I think you have an opportunity for it to be like the line's not going to move 2 points on Desmond Bane. But it should. It's these key players, I think, that are so essential for them. And I think that there are other players that really kind of like they're floor players is how I've kind of described them. They provide that underpinning of what you really need. For Dallas, for me, like a good example here is Dorian Finney-Smith. If DFS is out, they're losing such an important defender and weapon that can shoot from the floor. That's not going to be accounted for in the spread enough. Even if they move it a half point, he's probably worth 1 point to 1.5 points. And there's these numbers consistently, and they're written throughout all our analysis of action that you can find. So, I mean, Jim, that to me is like the big takeaway is you can find spots here where the thing to look for with injuries is not, oh, Dame's out, I'm going to bet against the Blazers. It's look for, oh, this other guy that doesn't get as much pub is out. And then sometimes I think that leaves an opportunity to actually fade the idea of a star player being out hurting a team.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I was actually trying to scroll through and find another example of a player like Bane you were talking about. I don't know if this is perfect, but the only one that kind of caught my eye is someone like a Patrick Williams on Chicago. Like that, he might not even move a line if he's out. But he does some heavy lifting on their defense. Being next to Vucevic and covering up for some of their wings. That's the type of player who, especially in a matchup where, like, if the opposition has a 4 who can really go at him. That is the type of player where a matchup may matter. But to your latter point, yeah, no, I agree 100%. Sometimes, looking at like the Suns without Chris Paul, it kind of just brings a chaos factor into it. That it obviously we want to land on a median and a point total, but the Suns will go out and I think they've won before today's game, where they smacked the Knicks. They won their 3 as an underdog and lost their 2 as a favorite with Chris Paul out. So it kind of just brings a chaos factor in that, maybe you look to zag sometimes when that star is out and fade a favorite or play them as an underdog. Just because it's a little harder to know.
Joe, what are your thoughts on this like general conversation, like how to approach these injury spots in the NBA? Because like, look, it's been a thing of bettors have tried the reason I don't necessarily preach the trying to follow the injuries obsessively and jump it. There are indications a lot now of guys being injured, and you'll see the line put in the middle in that nebulous zone between where he's in or out. And so I don't feel like you're betting into that liquid of a market. And I just think it's a lot to ask for, even if you're a listener to this podcast, for you to be like, hey, I'm going to need you to stay entirely on Twitter and ignore your friends and family and your bills and your girlfriends and everything. Even if there's if the building is burning down, I'm going to need you to be following the beat writer to find out if so-and-so is out. Like, I don't feel like that's sustainable. So I think instead taking these kind of angles is what's important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the ways to look at it too, and I always try to look at it in the prop market, is, like I write that, and I give out that weekly piece that drops on Mondays for my prop forecast for the week. And I'll like look at some of these spots where, maybe there's a back-to-back, or we've been dealing with somebody that's been missing time, or they're dealing with a nagging injury or something like that. And I try to look at it in advance and say, like, this is a spot that I'm targeting for this player. And, or this guy being out really impacts this other player. So like for the Blazers, it's easy. With Dame being out, it directly impacts Simons. And like, those are some spots where I'm like, I have in my head, like, I know, like when that happens, like if I see a line, it's like 3.5 threes for Simons, I'm betting it almost regardless of matchup, just because of the volume that he gets without Damian Lillard. So like sometimes if you get that notice and you're like, oh, like this, this so-and-so is out, then it gives you an opportunity to then like reflect on it, because while they can move the spreads and the totals, I think relatively easily, a lot of times the books don't really adjust properly on the prop market because they don't know where to go with it. Like they'll just say like, oh, like this is what this guy averaged in these games without Dame, but then they don't consider the fact that, in some of those games, like they didn't have Jeremy Grant, or they didn't have Nurkic, or they didn't have like Josh Hart, or whatever the circumstances. So if you go into it with that type of cap or that kind of background, you can actually say like, oh, this line's too high. And that's actually what we found recently with Detroit, where they were setting Killian Hayes lines because they were just too high, because they were like, well, people are going to pivot to Hayes. And then, but it's like, all right, like I'm not just going to bet overs because he's going to start because Dwayne Casey loves him, or he's going to get 30 minutes, but it's just like, it's still too high for this guy. So
it's still Killian Hayes.
Yeah, it's still Killian Hayes. So it's like, that's kind of the way I like to look at it too. And just say, you get that notice and it's like, all right, and now I know props are going to be live probably in the next 5 minutes, or whatever. Like I can take a look and see maybe there's an angle here that I had wanted to play, but just wasn't really available before.
One piggyback off that, I think they struggle a little bit at the extremes too. You were all over Bones season today. That one was it would have been hard for them to set a line that would have been like high enough. I just with all the people they had in health and safety, and knowing that Bones was gonna like it just screamed over, and he cleared it by what was it, like a dozen?
12?
Yeah. The extremes sometimes can be a little hard for them to naturally move it that far. So
exactly.
Let's move on to most important covers. It gives you the best games from the weekend and what we need to learn from them. We'll get to that game in this, because boy, did that not work out the way that I thought it was when I was writing this rundown. Let's start with the Jazz, who win again versus Portland. This team just remains red hot, 3-1 now versus division opponents, and that's a pretty good freaking division right now in the Northwest. I'm starting the clock on Utah to make the playoffs. And what that means is I'm not betting it, but if they're still here by December 15th, I'm going to have to bet it, because last year the Cavaliers essentially were the Jazz. Like, got off to this great start and everybody's like, well, okay, but like you had a 23 over under or 29.5 win total. There's no way you're that good. And everyone kind of waited. And then by December 15th, it was like, no, Cleveland's just good. And bet Cleveland to make the playoffs, which got me a good spot to bet against them in the Nets game. And I was able to make value on it. And that was with all the injuries at the end. If Cleveland hadn't gotten hurt in that last month of the season, they probably get the 6th seed instead of Chicago, and they make the playoffs outright, and that bet cashes. So I'm starting the clock on it. On Saturday night, after they beat the Blazers, Jared Vanderbilt, noted scholar, tweeted that Lauri Markkanen is an all-star, period. And Mike Conley retweeted it with a 100 emoji. To me, there's just no question here. I think we're just about done here, Joe. Lauri Markkanen is one most improved player, and Tyrese Halliburton's votes are dead. Let's just go ahead and
This is crazy.
I think we can go ahead and just call it. I'm comfortable. I know there's a lot of season left, but I think we Jared Vanderbilt tweeted he's an all-star. I don't know what there is to say about Lauri. Is Jared Vanderbilt tweeting that Tyrese Halliburton is an all-star? I don't think so.
I mean, Halliburton should start in the All-Star game, honestly. But
for those that are new to the show, Joe was hammering Tyrese Halliburton from the second the most improved player opened over the summer. That was his guy. He's bet him night to night. We have an ongoing thing, and I continue to think that Halliburton's he's awesome. He's an amazing player, but the Pacers won't be good enough to qualify. Markkanen is like Halliburton, and that he's having this amazing season, but doing it on a team that actually wins games. And so, like, my question for you then is just, I do actually want to get your sense on this. Look, most improved player is going to be a fascinating debate. It was a long way to go. But I will say that I think the fact there's still kind of this like, really, Lauri Markkanen? I'm like, no, Lauri Markkanen is leading a current playoff team.
It's
like,
crazy.
This needs to be acknowledged.
It is like absolutely insane what he's doing. But like, honestly, like if we look at I just can't imagine that the Jazz are going to be a top seed in the playoff phrase. Like I think like what's going to happen is realistically is like the Jazz, if they make the playoffs or the postseason, let's call it that, like they're likely in the play-in, which means that they likely are like, they have to perform worse from this point through the rest of the season as a team, which I think hurts Markkanen. And that probably, or that means that he's just playing worse or like whatever the circumstances are. The other thing is like his numbers are good. He's averaging like 22 and 8 or like 8.5. But I guess like I don't really see it when you have these other guys. No, like when you have these other guys that are contributing in more ways. Like SGA is contributing across the.
If we're being real here, it's SGA. Like he's the odds-on favorite at FanDuel plus 110, and he should be. Like SGA is in that. Hey, is he most improved player? No, he might be MVP. Like he just might be,
and that's what they love to give lately.
Like ridiculous.
He's what they thought Ja Morant was doing last year is what SGA is doing this year.
So much Grizzlies slander.
Yeah, I will slander the Grizzlies to no end. And then, but like I think that my difference with Halliburton was that the offense is actually good. Like their offense is good. Like the Pacers offense was not good at all without him. Granted, I guess the Jazz wasn't good without Lauri either, but it's, I think it's a little bit more direct comparison just between last year and this year. But I don't know. I still like Halliburton. I think he impacts more players with his ability because he's helping with the assists. He's facilitating the offense. He's not as much of just like a true scorer, but and he's still putting up 20 a game.
Look, again, this is SGA, but I'm just going to go ahead and fact check you right here. Utah has the 4th best adjusted offensive rating. Indiana is 9th. Utah is 21st in defense. The Jazz are 25th. The Jazz have a plus 3.6 adjusted net rating. That's actually good. The Pacers have a minus 0.4. That's actually bad. Like
it is bad.
They're a bad team.
They are bad. But if we look at last year, like granted, I don't know to what extent we can attribute this only to Lauri Markkanen because the Jazz brought in all these vets that the collective is really just making the offense so much better.
Sure, they got rid of Donovan Mitchell, Bogdanovich, and Rudy Gobert, but really it's Lauri Markkanen that's got all the help. I get
That's
it.
exactly what it is. It's a system. He's in the system. He's playing in the Jazz system of offense.
If we're excluding SGA and you got to pick between Tyrese Halliburton and Lauri Markkanen, who do you like for most improved player right now?
Oh
Halliburton.
boy. Joe knows I ride shotgun with him on Halliburton, but for this award, I do think you're right. I think Markkanen is I'd probably lean towards Markkanen only because if you look at Halliburton, what he was doing for the Pacers last year, and it's part of why I rode so hard shotgun on the 25 and 10 bet.
Yeah,
That's looking really tasty and possible. He was basically doing that for the Pacers last year. So I think if Markkanen is able to keep up these numbers and the Jazz keep winning, I think it's feasible. But I actually don't know if I have a slate. I have a comparison for you, Matt. So you mentioned that the Jazz as this year's Cavaliers. We mentioned maybe in passing, Mike Conley today had a non-contact knee injury. Now there's potential it might not be anything, but they're going to reassess when they get back from the road trip. If that is something, could that be the Ricky Rubio moment in the season where they suddenly start to fall off? They're not a top 3 seed in the West, which I don't think any of us think they are going to be. They slip down to that 7 through 10 morass. They end up slipping out of the playoffs entirely. Then suddenly the Pacers, in the 11 seed, then the records are kind of close.
Wait, what records are kind of close?
The Pacers, they may hover around 450 winning percentage. Hey, you said negative 0.4. That's
Pacers
not a terrible net rating.
They are 9-6. They are 9-6. The other thing I think is interesting though is if this were just a narrative show, we'd be talking about like Tyrese Halliburton deserves more attention. They're 9-6, and look what he's doing versus Lauri Markkanen. But we're a betting show, so we deal with what actually is being discussed. And everyone's like, "Wow, Utah's really good," and like, look at Lauri Markkanen. And no one's talking about the Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton. They're like, "Yeah, he's getting good numbers. Good for him." So anyway, like that's it. Like that's just because it's exactly what we expected. The Pacers are going to score a lot of points. Tyrese Halliburton's going to put up a lot of numbers. That's it. Like that's the end of the conversation. Is like, okay, cool. The question I think is you have to talk yourself into one of these teams being in playoff contention: Thunder, Pacers, or Jazz.
It's rough. Yeah,
and maybe that's why you should go ahead and wait on most improved player.
My
Philly gets a big win versus the Bucks on Friday, and that was a monster win. Milwaukee's starting to slide like a little bit. The offense is finally starting to catch them because they've been bad offensively from the start of the season without Khris Middleton. That continues. Jim, I'll ask you, do you think it's just Khris Middleton that's missing from this team? And then when they get back, they're going to be fine. When they started off and they were just destroying everyone, we're like, here are the Bucks again, Giannis MVP. And now it's kind of starting to look like, they can't really score. And that's a problem. Getting to be a little bit of an issue for them a little bit. Do you think Middleton fixes all that?
I think he fixes most of it. I think they did come out of the gates, really hot, but I think a decent portion of that was the schedule. That it was about as soft a schedule as you can possibly have those first, I think 10, 11 games. And I say this half in jest, but half serious. Maybe we're seeing like the delayed effects of that overseas trip. I mean, that's something you brought up. That was a really, really cool factor you brought up in preseason. And, it's leaning on the Warriors pretty heavy right now. And, we didn't see it at first from the Bucks. They started off, undefeated. And it was like, oh, well, that's not a thing. Maybe it is. Maybe that's a little bit of the tired legs that are getting front rims on jumpers and making that offense not click quite as much as we're used to.
Yeah. I mean, that offense too, like if we really look at it, like based on last year, the Bucks, like they crushed their threes and they made a lot of their threes. And this year they're not really dropping. Yeah. But if we look at Milwaukee's offense, like they're still getting those looks. Like the system is working, but it's just a matter of the shots aren't falling. So I think that getting Middleton back, who is a sharpshooter, is just an absolute bucket. that's got to help the offense. And, maybe they try to figure out which of their guys is the one that they're going to have to keep on the floor in terms of 3-point shooting, whether it's Allen, whether maybe Carter is the guy now, and he continues to get more minutes with the starters. But I think that shooting should regulate, because their expected effective field goal percentage versus their actual effective field goal percentage is a little, it has quite a bit of a gap right now at this point in the season. And I expect that to kind of even out, especially since, they are a good shooting team at their core. And I think that when you get Middleton back, your offense can't get worse.
I agree. They're also probably going to improve because so here's how I'll put this. I was pretty convinced that by the end of the week, like on Wednesday, Thursday, I was pretty convinced that by the end of the week, they were going to have made a trade. They were going to have been part of a trade for Jay Crowder. That's been reported. That's been out there. That started really burbling and like caught fire. And then like everyone was talking about it. Bucks they lost one of their longtime personnel people passed away. It was really the people I've talked to are really upset that knew him. And so it was really horrible. That's obviously, everyone's just going to take a little bit on that. There's been some other talks with Phoenix for Crowder. There's a couple of other suitors on there, but it looks like Phoenix is moving into position to go ahead and pull the trigger on the Crowder trade. And when that happens, if the Bucks wind up with him, Crowder fits a lot of their problems. Now, that will mean a little bit of their shot creation disappears. They'll get tougher. They'll add another wing, which they honestly were really short on after the Ibaka trade was a disaster for them, in my opinion. Yeah. They're still trying to fix that. We'll see who they wind up sending out, but they're going to lose some shot creation in that deal. If they get Crowder, I still kind of expect them to wind up with Crowder. They're the one team that makes the most sense. And they're the one team that I've heard people I've talked to have said that Milwaukee seems like the most reliable in terms of being willing to go forward with it and most enthusiastic. So definitely not a position, I think, to start. You don't want to start like, ooh, I want to go another direction against the Bucks. Like division, if you like them for the title, I wouldn't waver off of that. Everything should be fine there. Kyrie returns with the Brooklyn Nets on Sunday. And of course, there was controversy because hate group protested outside. That's fun. That's not fun at all. It's horrible. And Kyrie, once again, after the game, made a bunch of messy comments that you can find out online. This is a betting show. We're going to focus on other stuff. I'm not really impressed with this win because Memphis, as we talked about, is a shell of itself right now. I will say I've got an article coming out tomorrow that does my power ratings. That's got my power ratings, not power rankings, power ratings. These are what my numbers spit out. I have Brooklyn as the 4th best team in the NBA, and that hurts me deeply. It makes me sick to my stomach. And that's after manual adjustments to bring them down. I can't drop them any further. There's a reason for it. They're top 15 in half-court offense, half-court defense, transition offense, transition defense. They're top 5 in 2 of those categories. They're good in terms of the numbers. Kyrie makes me nervous because they've been winning with defense lately, and I don't trust them when he's on the floor. Jim, do you have it? What's your big takeaway from Kyrie returning to the Nets?
This is kind of a basic takeaway, but I think it helps the ceiling a lot, and I think it shatters the floor. I think it just makes them, the most variant team in the league, like they've been for the last 3 seasons. If things are clicking, they do look like the 4th best team in the NBA. Like that's what we've always said about them on paper. And Simmons is even, starting to show some signs of life. But I can't get there from a non-numerical perspective. We've seen so many times this team get in their own way as soon as things start to look decent. And, some of it's injury stuff you can't really help, but a lot of it is stuff that you can control, and they are terrible at controlling. So from a long-term perspective, I'm still going to stay away. From a day-to-day, I'll hop in, and while the good times are good, I'll try and join you, because I do think that, because that long-term perspective is so ugly, a lot of people that bleeds into their day-to-day view of them and can almost, in a weird way, make them a little bit underrated in the market at times.
You got the Rosso O'Neal stat for me.
So Royce O'Neal has been a bucket with Kyrie Irving, and they keep setting his line at 1.5 threes. They did this on Sunday, logged in the action app. We cashed in the first quarter on the over.
Wow.
He made 4. He averages 2.7 on 6.1 attempts. So that's 43%. For whatever reason, when Kyrie Irving plays, he just drains threes. So there, I think it's kind of a hard line to adjust, because you go to 2.5 and you start getting a lot of like weird variance with rotations. And you probably have to juice the over, and then that still becomes a play because of where he's averaging. He's at 2.7 on that many attempts. So I do like this. I think it's a spot that you can continue to play. As long as they're going to as long as they keep hanging a 1.5, he should be able to make 2, especially when he's getting almost 7 attempts with Kyrie Irving on the floor. And that's even some games with Joe Harris, with Seth Curry, with Patty Mills. He's still getting those opportunities.
It's a dynamite prop play.
Just a random one.
No, it makes a lot. I think of one of the reasons it makes a lot of sense to me is with Kyrie, you can run more pick and roll. And KD always wants to get to the middle of the floor because he likes the middle of the floor a lot and he wants the options that it presents. Kyrie runs more side pick and roll, which means the defense has to overload. And Kyrie's really good at reversing to the other side. He's not one of the best passers in the NBA at that, but he is pretty reliable and at least looking for it. And Royce is almost always their weak side shooter. So I think that's probably where a lot of that comes from. The Nuggets. So they get hit with health and safety protocols. No Joker. No Aaron Gordon. Well, Aaron Gordon's been sick. He should be back maybe for the Pistons game. He's been sick, non-COVID, which I'm sorry. I'm just having a hard time. Like, oh, what a coincidence. Aaron Gordon's really under the weather at the same time that 2 of his teammates are in COVID protocols. Weird. Like,
I don't get it.
It's just how this stuff works, man. Sometimes you just won't test. If he doesn't test positive, if he stays out and they're testing him daily, if he stays out, then he should be back. Like he almost played, I think, on Sunday. And so he should be back. But Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, there's no telling. And like, trust me, I've asked, and there's not going to be any sort of inside info on, he tested negative, he should be out in a couple of days. Like, no. There's also, as a reminder, this is a good opportunity to remind bettors as we get into COVID season. What a world. That when they get cleared, do not expect them back the next game. So when you hear that they're out of health and safety protocols and they're questionable, it is not like with an injury where they're out and then listed questionable. The conditioning is a problem because they're away from the team. They're not doing shooting. They're not doing anything. And if they're symptomatic, there's obviously leftover, as I can attest, because I had COVID for literally like 2.5 months.
That's
COVID
crazy.
symptoms. There's just lingering stuff. And so a lot of guys, they are not back for 2 to 3 games after being out of health and safety. However, despite all that, Jim, the Nuggets in Dallas, after getting annihilated on Friday night, thanks to a Vlatko Cancar delayed halftime sequence. You can look it up. Just go read Tim McMahon's story on it. With a Vlatko Cancar half-court shot with 2 seconds left on the clock to end the second half after halftime. Yes, I said that. And then Michael Porter Jr. with a massive 3 at the end. They get the win versus the Mavericks. This is a absolutely monster win for the Nuggets. And the reason I say that is 1, it splits the season series 1-1 with the Mavs. And 2, they lost that Knicks game in horrifying fashion. This essentially gets the value of that game off. So if you thought going in, they should beat the Knicks and then lose to the Mavericks twice, they should be 1-2 after these 3 games without these guys. Now they're in that exact same spot. Like, that's where they're at. It was a huge win for Nuggets tonight.
It's massive, especially on the West right now. You've got 11, maybe 12 teams who you start being, that's a playoff team. Yep, that's a play. Yep, that's a playoff. At some point, a few of these aren't going to make the cut, right? And all of these teams are hovering right together right now. I think it's like 2 games separating. I'm going to leave out the Jazz for a second because I assume they're going to slide a little bit. But second place to like 11th place, I think is 2 games. And I mean, all these teams are going to be going in and out of health and safety. We've talked about the injuries. They're all going to be having players injured. If you can get a lucky win here, a lucky win there, avoid a crazy tank when you're in health and safety protocols. Those are going to be things at the end of the season that are going to be the difference between being in the play-in and being the 3 seed. I don't see it shaking out all that much to separate. It's a tight West. The parity is awesome, but it means that you got to win, get a couple lucky wins when your stars in health and safety.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you got to have the guys that step up. And like, I think the nice thing with the
Who
Nuggets
stepped up on Sunday night, Joe?
we got Bones. It's Bone season. So I mean, he's been awesome. I mean, the last couple games he's played, he's getting his minutes. He's playing over 20 minutes a game, and he scored in his last 4 games. Or his last 3 games rather, without Jokic. He's got 21 points, 17 points, 29 points. So he's been a bucket. And the thing is, too, he's also making his threes. So in the last 3 games in the same situation, 3 makes, and 5 makes on 8, 11, and 10 attempts. So he's all over the floor. He's taking the reins to the offense. And I think it's great for a couple different reasons. But the first of all is the Nuggets need him to perform. Yeah. But I think that they also really need him to be like a 6th man. And if this is the way that he can get there and get comfortable and get these big reps, and it's something that I talked about before about the Grizzlies, but if Bones can do that basically for the Nuggets, that's an incredible development opportunity for him. And, Malone's going to play him since it's not his rookie season. So he can actually get...
We already looking for 2023, 2024 Bones most improved player props. Are we going to be riding on that all season?
We might.
I already have him for 6th man. So
he's going to win something at some point.
Right? Chicago's slipping hard, and there's just like a lot of doomsday around them. They got the KOC time to blow it up treatment that 7 teams a year get. And if they fall, Jim, I'll ask you this real quick question. Like, there's a lot to break down with Chicago. I'll let Brandon rant about it next Friday. If they fall, who do you think takes advantage and gets into the play-in conversation in the Eastern Conference?
The team that I cannot quit this season, the Orlando Magic.
What?
Oh my God.
Okay. Hear me out for a second. So they're struggling right now. I think they're 5-12. Let me look up exactly what they are. They are 5-12. Yep. But their Pythag is a little bit higher. They're 7-10. They've had a couple of unlucky losses. They've got some injuries right now. I think the key thing, and you've said it before on this podcast, it's true. They need a point guard to steady the ship. So until they seem to be able to keep someone healthy in that position, I'm not going to see it, but I still love the long-term future of this team, and long-term even being end of the season if they can, or middle of the season if they can just get those point guards on the court. What I do worry about, Paolo, it's been 6 games with an ankle injury. They don't really seem to be rushing people back. I do worry a little bit that, they're the secret Wembanyama. Like we're going for Victor. I do worry that
they have him.
Yeah.
Bull.
Imagine Bull and Victor together. I'm sure that's what their front office is thinking. So this is the team that to me intrigues me. I can't quit them, but there's red flags aplenty for sure. So I could be talked out of it.
Well, I mean, I think the question is if you like the Pacers and think they're going to make the playoffs, and the Raptors and they're going to make the playoffs, and all these different teams. Whereas the Pacers, Magic,
Pacers are falling off. Pacers are falling off. They'll be just outside it.
Look, I talked about the Magic on Friday, and I like their win total over of 27, but the playoffs seem like a high bar. I kind of think, look, the Knicks are the 10th seed right now. Miami's 11, and that's, they're racked with injuries as well. We didn't even get to them. Without Hero and Butler, they got destroyed by the Cavs, but I don't really know what to make of the Heat right now. I genuinely don't. The Knicks, I think, are pretty decent, Joe. I really do. I think this is a decent team. I think that, they lost to the Suns on Sunday. That's a rough spot. They lost in Golden State and in Phoenix. Got the double altitude win versus Utah.
That was big.
And Denver. That helps. They're 8-9. I just think that the Knicks are a perfectly fine team. Like I think that they are just solid.
They beat the teams that they're supposed to beat generally, and then they get absolutely hosed by the good teams. That's just the way that they are this year. And we'll see if RJ can find his shot at all, because he just literally he couldn't throw a basketball into the ocean right now. But like it's I think that these teams falling off, where you have a team that does have like a relatively high floor in the Knicks, like once they figure out their rotations, it should sure up a postseason berth for them. I don't know about playoffs, but it should at least put them in the postseason picture. I think that they should be at least a 500 team.
Can I circle back to one thing real quick, Matt, for I do want to clarify that I was reading this as I already saw the Bulls as a play-in team. So to replace them as a play-in team, I see the Magic. Yeah, no playoffs. Don't go making Orlando Magic playoff bets, please.
Not saying you think the Magic are going to finish above the Sixers. I get it.
Please do not make that bet and then blame me.
No. I think the Magic are going to be okay. I think I would love to see them in the point guard. You said women, entering the women Yama. Instead, will they get Scoot? Solve your point guard issues with the other phenom in the draft. Like, you get Wembanyama, okay, great. You can trade Wendell Carter Jr. and get great return on him, but you get Scoot Henderson, and you're just like, hey, we're Scoot, good. Franz, Paolo.
It's a fun team.
So yeah. All right. Lastly, we're going to do best bet on MVP right now. So if you had to bet right now, we're just going to do MVP this week and not the entire award slate like I did with AC. Joe, let's start with you. If you had to bet right now, if I told you like, here's $100, you got to bet at FanDuel Sports right now, who are you betting for MVP?
It pains me to give this recommendation, but Joel Embiid, he's plus 850 on FanDuel. You can shop around and maybe get see what other numbers are out there on the market, because this is always kind of moving. I think that this is his opportunity. If I like it as a spot to buy into him, I think that it's going to be too late to do it in 2 weeks, because when Harden comes back, he's going to have already had that, that like pop up in his stats against this kind of soft schedule coming up. And like you said, he likes beating up on these bad teams. He is going to love this opportunity to just roll through some teams, maybe pick up a player of the month, throw that one in the MVP, portfolio, and see how he can keep doing it. But I like Embiid for this, especially at this number. I think it's a good opportunity to buy into him right now.
You can shop around and find longer numbers, and we'll see how the number fluctuates at FanDuel. At plus 850, this is a 10.5% implied. That does seem low to me. I just think, one, with the variance of the season, right? If you expect that one of the top 4 guys, Steph, Luka, Giannis, Embiid's probably in the 4 range.
Yeah, I guess it's Embiid, yeah.
Yeah, if you expect some of the other guys like Donovan Mitchell to fall off, Ja, I think falls off.
Yeah.
Those guys, even if they fall off, I think Embiid probably gets a chunk of those percentages towards him. And if anybody else falls off, I think Embiid slides in there. So I can't hate that bet, even if it's not mine. Jim, what's your I'll go ahead and give mine, because I think we're on the same page here, actually.
Yeah.
It's Steph. Guys, Steph's absurd. He's like, look, never been the biggest Steph guy. I'm not a shooty hoops person. I like passing. I like set. I'm like, what a well set screen there. I'm like, oh, did you see how he dug in and read that pass and made a deflection? I know he scored, but like that sequence, I am not the holy shit he pulled up from 35 feet guy. Not my thing. But good God, before tonight's win over the Rockets, Steph is averaging 32.8 points per game, 6.8 boards, which, by the way, that's a ton. He is averaging more than Shea in rebounds per game, and he's only 0.6 behind Tatum for boards. He's averaging 6.4 assists. He's averaging more assists than Tatum and Embiid and Giannis. He's averaging more assists than Giannis. He's averaging a solid 1 steal per game. That gets him in those categories. 53% from the field, 45% from 3, and 93% from 3-point range. So that's a good 53, 45, 93 shooting splits. Steph's absolutely absurd. I mentioned this on Friday. I will keep going back to it. The number 1 5-man lineup with 100 minutes played this season is the Golden State Warriors starting lineup. And they've lost every road game until tonight versus what is almost a non-NBA team. Like,
yeah,
I cannot stress enough how over the course of a season, the Warriors are gonna be fine. And Steph's number has to shorten. Luka, I think, is going to keep doing this. If anything, honestly, I think the lowest, the point now where I'm kind of out, I already have a big position on Giannis. Got in on Giannis in the summer. I got in on Giannis in parlays with Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, but Pat Mahomes and all these types of things. I'm good on Giannis for right now. This is, to me, Jim, this is not a buy point time on Giannis. It is Luka, Embiid, Steph is where you want to get your money in for MVP, unless you're one of these people that thinks Tatum wins, which I had explained on Friday I can't get to.
No, I mean, it doesn't make for great podcasting, but ditto. I mean, you covered it really well. I think the biggest thing being that I'm low on the Warriors, this team I'm low on, but you're 100% right. The 5-man unit is not the problem. And if they start to, as the season goes along, slowly shed some of those minutes, what Steph's doing, looking at last season now looks like a little bit more like the outlier. His shooting was down, whether it's for the chase for that record or, just worn out legs or whatever it may be. This season looks a lot like 2 seasons ago, and these numbers look very sustainable. And I know, Joe, you're the prop king, but one that I've been loving this season is they are just not moving Steph's line. You're getting 27.5 most nights. Tonight it was 27.5 against the Rockets, which kind of blew my mind because also these Warriors aren't really blowing teams out. So he's playing 34 minutes a game and he's cruising over these totals. I think he's hitting 11 of 16 now.
Yeah, he's
and he's been clearing it by like 5-6 points. So that's one that until they adjust, I think they're weighing last season a little too heavy when I think maybe there were some other factors there for Curry, the chase and that we've seen in every sport that wears on athletes when they're leading up to a record. I think this year he is locked in. I think he sees as a chance to grab another MVP. I think, he wants to pass LeBron in rings. He wants to catch folks and everything. Like, I think he's pretty locked in right now. And I'm going to keep riding these point total overs. And I'm with you on the MVP, Matt. I think he's great value.
Okay, let's get wrap it up for buckets for your Monday episode. Sean, Chicago Flow, will be back with Jay and folks on Tuesday morning for your best bets episode. I will be with you hosting with the fellas going into Wednesday's episode. We're off Thursday, Friday, no Thanksgiving, no Black Friday. We'll be back with you on Monday. So check out the best bets episode tomorrow. Check out the best bets episode on Wednesday. Enjoy your Thanksgiving weekend. Eat lots of turkey. Go ahead and use your winnings betting on these games and these props to get some cranberry sauce. That good cranberry sauce. By the way, look it up. There's a pear cranberry sauce recipe that's floating out there. Look it up. It is absolutely the best cranberry sauce you will find in the universe. You can find most things betting, not the recipe, but everything that's betting you can find on the Action Network app. Make sure to check that out. The award-winning app. You can follow Joe and Jim in there. Jim's at Jim Turvey Bets. Joe's in there at Joe Dolera. I'm in there at HP Basketball. Check it out. Fade or follow. Appreciate you guys. 5-star reviews. Always love those. We'll give you a free pro sub if you give us a 5-star review for buckets. Thanks so much for everything. We'll see you guys again tomorrow with the Best Bets episode here. Till then, let's get buckets.